Um, Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you may be. My name is Ivan. I am the CEO and founder here at a company called Datasaur. So today we're going to focus on how to select the right model for your project. Just a little bit of background about the company and myself. We've been around for 6 years. We started this company 6 years ago to focus on everything related to natural language processing. This is my second company. We're backed by accelerators like the Stanford StartX Accelerator as well as Y Combinator. Also, one of our early angel investors was the president of OpenAI, well before they became a household name. Why are we giving this talk today? We've had the opportunity over the last few years to build and develop for a lot of the top enterprise companies out there. So we've been talking to them about their natural language processing goals and aims, both before and after the advent of LLMs. And so we have a better sense for what is really important in the enterprise sector when it comes to deciding, what the goals are of any given project, along with some of the unique constraints and requirements. And then finally, how people are thinking, how the thinking has evolved when it comes to LLMs. Early on, we saw a lot of companies just struggle with, is this technology real? Can it actually help? Now we see much more advanced decision making criteria. People thinking about, do we want to use open source versus closed source? Do we want something that is, very large and robust and can answer everything, or do we want something that is much smaller and much more tailored and specific? So we'll be going through some of those common decision-making criteria today and share some of the best practices that we've seen data organizations adopt across the world. Here is the agenda. We are going to, of course, spend the majority of our time talking about the right model for the project. But alongside this, since this is a very practical hands-on builder summit, we'll also be talking about how you can connect that model to kind of your knowledge base and make sure it has the right information. We want to talk about building in a portable way. I think this is actually one of the more recent trends, is building in a way that you can swap from one family of models to another as appropriate without disrupting the rest of your engineering processes. Then we'll talk about actually deploying and using the model, fine-tuning those models, and finally, if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about automated evaluation. This feels like a lot of different topics, but I think they're all related to continuing to have confidence that you're using the best model out there. Okay. In speaking with a lot of data scientists, these are some of the most common mental blocks that I want to hopefully allow us to get past today in the next hour or so. I see a lot of data scientists kind of stick with one model. Maybe they started with Anthropic's Claude, maybe they started with OpenAI, and it feels like, it's kind of like cleaning your garage, right? You want to do it, but it just feels like it's something that you got to put off. We'll do it next weekend. Like, when I have time, I'll get around to exploring the others. So we'll try to make it really easy to explore and understand how different models perform. RAG is kind of the next stepping stone. Once people are comfortable, it's very easy for people to jump in with prompt engineering. But once you have that done, how do we make sure that we're able to leverage this retrieval augmented generation to connect our own databases in a really simple manner? And then finally, this is actually the most common block that we've seen. There's this block before people get to fine tuning. Again, I actually see a lot of data scientists that have, looked at multiple models, prompt engineering, implemented RAG, but it just feels like fine tuning is this thing for like academics and research scientists. And it's, it feels big and scary, and I'll do that later. We'll share how you can initiate fine tuning in minutes, but you can have it ready by the end of the day, right? And how powerful of a technique that is. So again, this is really aimed for, I'm going to assume that you're here because you want to be building something practical. Maybe you have some baseline experience, but you're looking to kind of level up and get to the next step here. I've been told that with StreamYard, there is a chat capability and questions will be coming in throughout. I'll be keeping tabs on that on my second monitor. If you see me glancing up, I'm just looking for questions. If anything comes up at any time, or if there's specific aspects you want me to address or talk to in particular, I'm more than happy to pause and make sure that everybody is keeping up. I believe if you registered for the session, you would have gotten an email with some of the prerequisites for this. Very simple. There's one zip folder with just 3 files. This is completely generated synthetic data that you can use to follow along today's activities. And then the only other tool that we're going to use is Datastore. I cleared this with the ODSC committee ahead of time. I know that we're all big fans of open source tooling here. Datastore is completely free to use, completely free to register. The only charges that will charge to your card will be if you use inferencing, because that has a cost, we'll just pass those at cost directly to you. So no additional surcharges there. There's a whole enterprise package, but it'll help you get started with today's tasks in particular. You'll actually have plenty of credits to get through today's particular tasks, with one exception, which is fine tuning. And then beyond that, everything is just passed through at cost. Okay. All right. So let's start with, why do we have this topic in the first place? This is my favorite series of slides. I've been giving presentations for the past year. I started tracking this in May when there was all this hype around GPT-4o and just how good it was, right? And then in June, the best model everyone was talking about was 3.5 Sonnet. In July, Llama 3.1. In August, 1.5 Pro from Google Gemini. September, GPT-01, a whole new approach to models. October, you can see I'm running out of space on the slides here, and I wasn't sure how long this trend was going to keep going. But, December, we closed the year strong, and we had DeepSet v3, which has kind of set the industry alight with kind of speculations and rumors and like, how are we going to be able to build models much more cheaply? Llama continued its kind of crazy pace of releases with Llama 3.3. Gemini had a big update with 2.0, and then people were speculating again about AGI with OpenAI's O3. So this train is really not stopping. And that means that I feel for all of you, right? For those of us practicing in the field, it can feel like, it can feel overwhelming. What models should we really be starting, right? How are there just so many out there? And how can we possibly keep up? I spend so many hours each week just reading and keeping up to date and testing all these different models. But that's a large part of my job. For those of you who need to actually build, it might feel like, oh, if I commit to a model now, in 3 months, my technology will already be obsolete. And I think it's that sentiment that we specifically want to address today. And it's part of that, I had that one line about building in a portable manner. We want you to be able to build with confidence on any one of these models. But as something new is launched out there, you're able to update and migrate over to another set of models very easily. And we'll talk about kind of the mindset and approach we can take along with some practical kind of like what we should be keeping track of that allows us to build in that portable way. A lot of, I think, like level 1 is that everybody is just looking at the accuracy of the models, right? So they care a lot about how good these answers are. And it's something that, again, almost every article out there is really emphasizing, because they are always talking about benchmarks and this new model beats OpenAI at this particular set of benchmarks. So we're always taught to care about the quality of the output. And of course, that's very important. But in addition to the quality of the answers, it's also increasingly important for pragmatic solutions to talk about cost, right? This is the first time in a generation, perhaps in our lives, that software is not outright free. It doesn't have zero marginal cost moving forward. So we have to actually think through, like, if we're going to scale this to maybe 1,000 API calls a month, still might be negligible, still might be like nickels and dimes. But For some of the organizations we're talking to, this is 10 million API calls a month, right? And at that point, it really starts to add up. And having some cost savings between one model and another can really start to stack up for you and your organization. Beyond that, there are also other parameters you have to consider. There are things like timeline, right? Do you want to build something that already works? Do you want to build something from scratch, or do you want to buy something off the shelf that already works? How long would it take to build? If you buy, how long would it take to buy and integrate? Security is a big one. So we work with legal and financial and healthcare and even US government. And they care deeply about, there have been entire organizations waiting on the sidelines because they can't send their data to a proprietary company. And so for them, it's a non-starter to send data to something like an Anthropic or an OpenAI or even Azure. And so for these, they have to start with an open source model that they can host and deploy and have on their own environment, right? There are also others who have a preferred cloud vendor. If you've been building for 20 years on let's say, AWS, and all your data is already there, it's going to be really painful to have to migrate all of that. Not only will it take you a lot of time and effort, some of these actually have data egress costs. So now you're incurring a cost just to move it from, say, AWS to Google Cloud Platform, right? And so now there's an existing heavy preference towards models that are available on one particular cloud platform. Data integrations is another. Again, it does come down to like where the data is stored. So if you have it in a SharePoint folder versus an S3 bucket versus a Dropbox, you'll want to think through like which ones integrate directly with those platforms. And then finally, you have things like SLAs. How long can an answer take? One of the most common use cases out there is customer support, customer service. And for customer service, you can, if the model is going to take longer than 5 seconds, you might lose the user just while they're waiting for a response, right? Whereas if you're in the healthcare space and you're asking medical questions, and this actually has, real world implications, you might let the model take as long as it wants, even minutes, to come up with a better, more accurate answer. So a lot of different variables factor in to how you would assess and determine which model you want to move forward with. Okay. So again, I am keeping an eye on the comments. If this is something that you have your own experiences with, or you have questions about, feel free to chime in with some of the things that have been important to you and your organization. And I'm happy to kind of touch on that as we continue with the evaluation here. Now, that's kind of the academic start to this. This is setting up the problem statement and why it matters. Now we're going to dive into how we actually build, how we would actually start assessing questions like this. Now, as I mentioned, we'll be spending today's session going through something called Data Source LLM Labs. So if you haven't registered yet, you can just go ahead and go to Datasource AI and go to the LLM Labs here. Or you can just do start for free LLM Labs. That'll be the fastest way. You can register and just sign in with your email address. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is the very first thing when you register, it's going to land you on a page like this one. You've got a sandbox. We'll create a new sandbox, and you'll have a blank slate sandbox application. What we have here is on the left-hand side, we have this gray box that we call an application. An application consists of multiple things. Yes, the most important thing is the model. Datasource is integrated with all the major cloud platforms, along with a startup called Diffbot. You can see DeepSeek is available here. We also have Hugging Face. So we have all the 50 of the most popular models out there immediately available. And then on top of that, we also have 200 additional models that you can kind of like set up and start using, right? So the crux of it will be the model itself. But an application also consists of system instructions, user instructions, and this knowledge base down here. So how do we start with this? Well, the majority of people do start with OpenAI. It is the largest brand out there. It's something that's very familiar to folks. And so we've got GPT-4o Mini as a default model. But let's add a couple more here. Let's say we want to also, we've heard a lot about this llama model, right? So let's go ahead and type in llama and let's test out the llama 3.2. You know, I don't want to go too large. 90 billion is perhaps overkill for today. Let's go with their 7 billion parameter model. Okay. And then let's just do one more here. So we'll go ahead and call this one. We'll say this is llama. We'll call this one GPT-4o. And then we will test one more. Let's see. How about we will do Gemini. There's been a lot of updates to Gemini. Flash is still kind of experimental. Let's go ahead and stick with the Pro version for now. And we'll call this one Gemini. And so I've set up 3 different applications here. And the idea is I've got these 3 models. And on the right-hand side, I can put in any prompt I want. So we're going to kind of stick with a financial theme today because that's relatively accessible to everyone. Let's start with a really simple question. What is fintech, right? We keep hearing this term. What is the actual definition of fintech? Now I'll go ahead and just run all 3 prompts. And you'll see all 3 of these models are checked. And what this will do is it'll actually show you, it'll give you answers from all 3 of these models right away. Oh, this one has maximum context length is 4,096, but we have 50 in the messages. So let's go ahead and increase. Oh, that is already max. Maybe we need to use a slightly larger model. Oh, this is also Llama 2. Let's find a Llama 3.1. 8 billion, that's the one. Okay, so let's rerun this. 3.1 is much better than 2.0 anyway. It'll give us better comparison. Okay, so what you can see is now we get direct answers from all 3 models. So now you can compare Gemini, GPT-4o, and Llama. Not only are you getting the answers from each of these models, but you also get the inference speed as well as the cost. Now, let me pause for a moment there because these numbers are not just numbers, right? First of all, Datastore will hint to you that GPT-4o is the cheapest option, while Llama is the fastest, right? It's a little faster, but not by much. You can see Gemini adds a full second here, right? But when we look at the cost, there's a much bigger difference. There's a couple extra zeros. It turns out this is actually about 40 times cheaper than the Gemini answer. So as I was saying earlier, there are real trade-offs that we need to make here. How much do we value the quality of this answer versus the fact that it takes this much longer or takes a little bit more, and it's going to cost us a little bit more, right? So back to the title of this presentation, which model is best for our use case? Well, it's going to really depend. We specifically are getting some very short answers here. When you have larger context windows, when you're answering something that is much more complicated, the trade-offs might be very different for you and your organization. But what we try to provide is all the information you might need to assess which one is going to work best. Now, in addition to kind of these answers on the right-hand side, let's go back to what other levers we have available. We have hyperparameter settings. So you saw me open this earlier. Anything that you would be able to set if you were in that environment itself, you would be able to set here. So you can set things like temperature, which is how creative the model should be. If you set it to 0, you'll get the same, in theory, get the same answer every single time. You've got top P, you've got maximum output tokens, the context window. So this is going to be set on a per model basis, right? So you can adjust these as appropriate. As I mentioned, the system instruction is already preset here. It's, again, just a very simple one. But we can also use Datastore's auto-generate, which is using, of course, another LLM to determine a good template for your particular instruction. So we'll start with, something simple. Handle customer questions and issues. Let's generate an instruction there. Again, we are using GPT-4o to auto-generate these instructions. We let that run for a couple seconds and we get the system instruction here. So now we use this, and now we've got a much more thorough and comprehensive prompt. And we'll see, if this is actually going to perform better. So now I can actually go ahead and uncheck these two because I really just want to see how that's kind of changed the Gemini response. Okay, so we are still kind of keeping, we also kept this in one paragraph. Let's remove that one paragraph instruction as well. Let's see how it answers now. Okay, so still relatively short. It's a relatively simple question, but now we are going to be able to provide it with these extra instructions that will hopefully guarantee a better answer for us, or we can continue experimenting with what prompt is going to be closest to the correct answers for us. Okay, so that is the model, the system instruction, as well as the user instruction. There's one more field here that we haven't talked about yet. And this is where we're going to start diving into knowledge bases and retrieval augmented generation. So with the knowledge base, we have the ability to go ahead and create a knowledge base just for this model. Let's go ahead and call this, I've prepared this. Again, this is going to be part of the prerequisites zip file that we generated. But now we've got this DynoBank FAQ. So this is just an FAQ text that has a lot of the frequently asked questions about this fictional bank, right? So we're going to go ahead and upload that as a knowledge base. Let's go ahead and create knowledge base. There are various embedding options. So just like we allow a lot of choice and selection with the models themselves, we also have the most popular embeddings available. So we'll just go with the Azure embedding. It can be relatively small. Chunk size, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the closest analogy I use is kind of think of the computer as reading things one page at a time. How large is each page? They will read one page at a time, which means there might be kind of like a split between one page and the next, which can lose information. So this is a variable that you might want to play around with and figure out what's the ideal chunk size. We'll set it to 1,000 for now. We'll save and update that knowledge base, let it run for about a minute and see how that performs. Okay, so now we've created this DynoBank knowledge base and we've connected it to Gemini. What we'll do is we'll also connect the same to GPT-4o as well as to Llama, right? So we've got this DynoBank that's now connected to all three of them. Let's re-enable these applications and go back to the right-hand side and rerun all those prompts. So now let's pull a slightly different prompt. How do I transfer my money to my friend? And then let's run this based on this FAQ that we just uploaded, right? Now you see that it's starting to get into much more specific details because we have more information that we just uploaded through that document, right? Not only that, I referred to that chunk earlier. Well, we can actually pull the corresponding chunks that it's referencing. This is saying like, hey, we looked at the document and we found these particular chunks that might be relevant to the question that you asked. And so here you've got both the completions as well as those chunks, and you can assess and look at all three of these. Llama actually did not find any corresponding chunks. But now you're able to assess the quality of each model once it's connected to this knowledge base. Okay. Are there any questions about what we've done so far? Have you been able to follow along with kind of this experience? Okay, I will take silence as acknowledgement. So this is the sandbox. And this is where you'll be doing a lot of your anecdotal kind of assessment and figuring out which model might works best from this perspective. Let's move on um, to actual deployment. So you've decided that all of these, this looks good. And Llama is actually the fastest and the cheapest out of all the models that you've looked at so far. Let's take a moment now and deploy this application. We decided this is the best one. Let's say we will call this Dino Bank AI Builder Summit. Okay, so we'll call that as the name of our application, and we want to go ahead and just let that deploy. Now we have an API endpoint that we can immediately use. This is an API endpoint that you can connect to any variety of front-end interfaces. As a quick plug, at the end of the AI Builder Summit, I'm going to give another 15-minute work session on how to build a Slack bot. We played around with Slack's kind of generative AI offering. It cost $10 per user per month. We found that that was not worth it for us, but we were able to use this exact flow to create our own internal Slack bot, and it only costs us, less than $10 for our entire organization of 55 people a month. And so we'll go through the exercise for how you can set that up for you and your organization. But this API endpoint here is actually going to be really powerful. And so all I need to do, first of all, you can just use this in a command line environment. You can just call this. But I'm going to go ahead and copy this. We've set up an Azure chatbot ahead of time. This is just as an example. You can set this up anywhere, right? So we have this chatbot that is able to, that looks and functions very similarly to ChatGPT. It's very easy to set up using the Azure environment. You can also do this in AWS or Google Cloud Platform. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and replace this API with the one that we just set up. And we remove the chat completions. Azure in particular already appends that to every single API. But when I go ahead and apply that here, now I go to the chatbot and I am using that exact model and application that we just worked on, right? So we have this Gemini model, and I can again ask that same question that I did earlier. What was my question? Let's go back to here. How do I transfer money to my friend? And I can ask it in the same, in this chatbot, might take a few seconds to warm up here. And you can see it's actually generating the answer based on that model that we just offered, right? So we go ahead and do all of the assessment that we did here in this sandbox, and we'll actually be able to have that live in whatever front-end interface we would like. Again, this can be on your own website. It can be in Slack. It can be in WhatsApp. The API endpoint can be used anywhere. So we went through this very slowly, step by step. But as you get fluent with this, if there's a new workflow that you need to test and assess for your own organization, you can have a model up and running from start to finish in less than 5 minutes flat, right? So we believe this is the easiest way to build and deploy applications. Now, let's take a step back for a moment. All of this has been kind of from the ground up to build and assess this application, these various applications. Notice what was missing in all of this, what we did not have to do. If we were to do this in a normal environment, we would have to go and set up an account and credentials with Google. We'd have to do the same with OpenAI. Llama is served in multiple locations, but this one is with Meta. Imagine this is Meta's Llama 3.1 via Amazon Bedrock. For some of you working in companies where security credentials aren't easy to come by, the process of getting your organization's API keys or credentials could take days, it could take weeks. This allows you to bypass setting up all those different accounts and just immediately getting started and assessing those applications. Moreover, you don't have to learn the different tooling in each cloud platform. You don't have to learn how Azure does it and how it's different from AWS does it. This allows you to kind of use one interface to just build and deploy these models rapidly. Okay. In addition to that, the deployment that we showed, this endpoint is going to be exactly the same, no matter the output of all of this is going to be exactly the same, no matter what model is beneath the hood. And so we set this up such that if your front-end engineer who's working on that chatbot, as long as you give them an API, they can swap it out. You can change the model under the hood. You can change the hyperparameters. You can change the knowledge base. And the interface is still going to be exactly the same to your front-end team. And that is part of the key to building in this portable manner, right? We want to make sure that this industry is still very much non-standardized. The models will return different outputs. But if you can set it up such that the API, the interface itself, is going to be the same to your front-end team, then you can kind of continue experimenting with and swapping out and upgrading the engine under the hood. Okay. Any questions so far? All right, let's move on. So far we've talked about selecting the model and deploying. Now let's talk about the next step. You've got this in production. How do you actually assess if the answers are any good? To do that, we're going to go ahead in the left-hand side here. You got sandbox, knowledge base. We've done those. Now we're going to go to the models catalog and go into this evaluation section. So let's create an evaluation project. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with a rating project, a manual rating project. With a rating project, what we'll do is we'll assign human labelers to rate the completions of your LLM application and offer better completions as appropriate. So let's call this AI Builders Rating Project. And then again, this comes as part of your prereqs. So this is a CSV. It has 2 columns, prompt and completion. Right. So what we've done is we've taken a bunch of different prompts and we've generated the completions from the model. So here are all those completions. We're going to go ahead and upload that. Very simple file. And we'll go ahead and create. This project has been created. AI Builders Rating Project. We'll go ahead and open that up. And now you have this interface. It's very simple. If lacking a registered mobile number, how can password reset verification be accomplished via the phone? And here's the completion from the model that we've been setting up. Now, all you have to do is you rate this from 1 to 5 stars. If it's 5 stars, it's perfect. We're done. If it's anything less than 5 stars, then let's go ahead and correct it, right? So you can say, hey, this looks all good, but we recently changed policy, so driver's licenses are no longer accepted. So we will just remove that and say, look, just such as a passport, right? And so we'll make slight corrections like that. We'll save, submit, and move on. What are the steps to do this? We'll go ahead and do this. So you can assign this either to yourself or you can assign this to a subject matter expert, someone who knows your bank's financial processes and operations really well. And you'll let them assess like, hey, do these steps actually work? Is this correct? Do we want to be more specific? Do we want to be more polite in our tone? Any of these changes can go ahead and make a big difference. So we'll just go through and finish all of this up. Now, this is really important. Once you have this information, once you've saved this data, you want to save this as ground truth. This is very valuable information. Once you save, you can do a number of different things with this ground truth data. you can continue to use this to evaluate other models in production. So let's say all of this we've done for our Gemini model so far, right? But if we want to switch over to, let's say, Mistral next month because they release a new version, you can use the same ground truth to actually evaluate how good the Mistral model does on these same questions. So you no longer have to rate every single one of the Mistral responses. You can use an LLM to compare what Mistral generates with what you've already saved as the correct ground truth data set, right? Moreover, you are able to use this ground truth to actually fine-tune your own models. Let's take a moment because I think there's a lot of different definitions out there around what fine-tuning really means. Fine-tuning is perhaps an overused word to mean customization more broadly. People are using it to say like, oh, this is a fine-tuned model here, fine-tuned there. But fine-tuning in this particular context means specifically to take an existing model, provide it a handful of examples, anywhere between 10 and like 200 examples of what a correct answer looks like. And then you can use that, and then you can use those examples to train that model one more time. It's an additional iteration on the existing foundation model. So you can start with any base model, with Llama, with Gemini, with GPT-4o, and you can fine tune it, and you'll have now a branched, specialized version of that model that has learned from your additional inputted answers, your correct answers. Okay. So how do we do that? Datasort also helps with fine tuning. We can go back to the models catalog. Again, here's all the different available models. You can see we've got, this is our catalog of over 200 models available. But here in the available section, you can just click on Create Fine-Tune Model. And we're going to go ahead and say this is AI Builder Summit Fine-Tune Model, right? Now, we can browse files. This is the fintech data set. We can take the exact same kind of manual rating. This is prompt, and now we assume these are the correct completions. We can go ahead and just select that as our kind of fine-tuning data set. So you can actually export this. Once you export this project, it'll give you a CSV. That's exactly the file type that you'll need for fine-tuning. So now you come here, you upload this fine-tune model, and it's going to actually generate, or it'll spawn off file header. Oh, sorry, we should be using the fintech data set instead. Slightly different headers. Same data information, slightly different headers. So now this is how many times you're going to run the fine-tuning, like how many times it's going to iterate to kind of like tune to that. 5 should be plenty for the small data set we have. And if we hit next, it'll say, okay, this is the base model. We're going to use the Llama 3.1. These are the kind of configuration we've set up for this, and then we'll start the fine-tuning job. Now, keep in mind, there are real costs, right? So fine-tuning will cost a couple $100, depending on your data set, depending on the model. It can cost up to a couple $100. It'll also take a few hours. So we're not going to run that now. It wouldn't be finished by the end of this particular webinar, but we did start the exact same job a few hours ago. So we do have a fine-tuned model ready to go. But there's this idea amongst a lot of data scientists we talk to that fine-tuning is this, kind of mysterious task that they would only want to start later on, that they'll have to learn. It's really as simple as this, right? You rate a few examples, you export this into a CSV, into a 2-column kind of spreadsheet, and then you just let the cloud do its job and just fine tune that model for you. And you will receive back a model that is going to be tuned to the very specific data that you've provided it. Okay, let's see what that fine-tuned model looks like. As I mentioned earlier this morning, we had run the exact same job before. So this is base model llama here. This is exactly kind of what we were looking at before with meta llama. And then we have fine-tuned llama. We've given it the exact same system instructions. Now, we'll go ahead and just run this prompt again live and see what the difference in the two answers are. Now, on this right-hand side, you can see that the fine-tuned llama has, if we look at the FAQ, which one is this? What are the steps to update a mobile number, right? How do I update my registered mobile number? You can see here, locate the personal information section, usually found under the profile menu, right? So visit the settings or profile section found in the top right corner of the page. So this is actually using information from that FAQ to now provide the correct answer. So it's really that simple. And there's also the additional benefit that this one is now faster and cheaper because it's already kind of tuned to this kind of information. And so now we can start using this fine-tuned model back in production, right? So again, we can deploy this application and we can go ahead and call this DynoBank fine-tuned model. And we can copy and paste this and put this into the chatbot. And simple as that, we now have our fine-tuned model readily available for immediate use in production. Okay. All right. Oh, sorry, I was on the wrong tab here. Let me jump in and answer some questions. There have been plenty of questions. Okay. So starting from the top, do SLAs include how often a model might be down and or unavailable? So SLAs that can so there are different terms for SLAs. In this case, I was referring to SLAs, meaning how many seconds does it take for the model to return the answer? Whereas there's another type of SLA, which is like how frequent will this be available? So those are two different types, and that's something that you definitely want to keep track of. Obviously, if you're using one of these major cloud providers, that will often be something that is very that is going to be up a lot more readily. But that is definitely something, especially if you're going to use open source and make it available on your own servers, that's something that you'll want to pay attention to for sure. Okay. Got a question from Jen here. Great point for security, especially for data privacy concerns. That's why I'm exploring federated ML for fraud protection without sharing data. Can you compare your approaches with federated ML? Absolutely. So I come from a background in search, and federated machine learning in our world allowed you to basically call different models. And the techniques we've talked through today are going to be great for exactly that, right? The fact that you have all these different models in the sandbox, that allows you to actually say, hey, you know, for these customer support questions, we can use OpenAI. But for something that is much more secure, like personal banking questions, like I'd like to post a trade to my account, that's something that we shouldn't be sending. So I can use open source for the more security-centric use cases, whereas I can use proprietary for other ones, right? So we actually see the equivalent of that rising up in the world of LLMs, where you do have different models being used for different workflows. Okay. Different LLMs perform differently for different types of tasks. What would be great is to choose model based on cost performance metric based on each type of task. Absolutely. That is very similar to kind of Jen's question earlier around federated ML. I encourage you to have different, for like an FAQ, you probably want something super small, something fine-tuned that is great at precisely that type of workflow. But for open-ended questions, or maybe you have a fallback, like, hey, you have this small model, say, I don't know the answer to that question. Go ask another larger model that is more generic, right? And so being able to have different fallbacks allows you to save on maybe 70% of questions. You can just save and use the smallest, most efficient model. But if that doesn't work, then you can fall back to a more generic one. Sheila, welcome. So how do we incorporate responsible guardrails as part of our model assessment? That's a great question. So there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can start with just putting it as part of the system instructions, right? So if you have very clearly defined guidelines for what guardrails you want to incorporate, you can incorporate that as part of your system instructions and make sure that it follows those rules. But beyond that, you can actually, we're building and deploying these to different cloud environments, to AWS, to GCP. You can actually, if you want to, connect this to AWS's guardrails, for instance. And now you've got an extra layer of security after it intercepts your model's answers. And before it comes back to you, you're using AWS guardrails to implement that additional layer. So this is fully integratable with other products in the market that are built and designed specifically for that. Emily, when we use the API endpoint through data store, is there an additional cost for going through data store instead of directly from the model provider? Good question. No, this is a recent change of ours, but this is not how we make money. We make money by selling this to enterprises and installing this on their VPCs on their enterprise. So you'll notice when you sign up for data store, when you register, you're given, I believe, 100 credits for free. Every single prompt run per application is 1 credit. So you can use that, use up those credits first. After that, it'll ask you for a credit card. We're only going to charge you exactly what the cloud is charging us. This is just so we're not losing money on every user that registers, but this is purely pass-through fees. Okay. Sorry, just catching up here. I'm going to, let's just go on to any other responsible AI metrics like biases, explain, and also data privacy metrics also. Responsible AI is definitely a very broad field and could probably merit its very own workshop, but it's something that we think a lot about here. One of the ways that we evaluate biases is actually through this manual evaluation project. When you're setting up these evaluation projects, you can actually set up labeling guidelines. And the guidelines can be anything from, is this answer correct, yes or no, through to, is this answer comprehensive? Was it respectful enough? You can imagine like somebody like the Ritz-Carlton would have very specific policies for the tone with which they approach their customers. So you can evaluate along many of these different guidelines, but one of them can also be responsible AI metrics like biases, right? So you can offer you can ask your human labelers, does this answer contain any level of systemic bias to it, right? Explanation is something that is built more into the model itself. So that would depend on the model and whether it provides an API that allows it to kind of explain where it comes from. Data privacy metrics, that one can be really hard. It's also ongoing change. It's constantly changing, but that's one where you kind of just have to dig into the terms and conditions yourself. We've been working with lawyers and info security organizations. These things are constantly in flux. We've seen some where they say, like, as long as this data is not being used to retrain the underlying model, it's acceptable. But we've also seen some where they say, look, despite all these guarantees, our compliance in our country just doesn't allow us to send to any third-party server. And so for those reasons, it has to be fully hosted on our servers. So that's something where it'll just depend kind of organization to organization. How do we navigate to the API/CLI interface? So again, if you just click on deploy application, you can select any of these. It'll immediately take you to deployed applications. It's also here on the left-hand side. All your deployed applications are available here, so you can track which ones are deployed. This is also very useful for tracking your own costs. You want to make sure that you don't have too many deployed or things that you're no longer using. You can go ahead and suspend, right, to save your organization money. So all of that is available through this dashboard right here. Yeah. Okay. What do you use for evaluation of the answers besides reading them? If we get a chance, I'm going to talk about automated evaluations next. That'll be kind of the final step of the demo. And once we have that, or once we talk through kind of automated evaluations, you'll see kind of the various options that we have for that. But I'm going to return to this question. Thank you, Lily. Can we monitor the usage of a deployment? You would be able to. So yes, you can have some kind of analytics and usage from the data store platform. One thing I'll add as well is for convenience, so you can see we've been racking up as we've been preparing for this demo. So you get some sense for usage from this page here. This is also a good chance to call out that for convenience sake, everything is running through data store APIs. And for a lot of our users, they prefer it that way. But if necessary for your organization, you also have the ability to connect your own external API keys. So if you want all of this running through your AWS account, through your GCP account, you can connect those as well. Data store encrypts everything by default. We are HIPAA and SOC 2 compliant, but if that's not sufficient, you want this going through your own Hugging Face credentials, OpenAI credentials, that's an option as well. And once you have that, then you can also track model usage through your OpenAI account. Okay. It would be nice to see the evaluation metrics before we decide to deploy the application. Good point. That's a little bit of chicken and egg, right? So the idea here is you can use this sandbox to anecdotally assess how good the answers are. Now, if you want, you are welcome to just kind of quickly deploy, gather those questions, and use that to generate this evaluation project, right? So you can do that, but this requires a little bit more time and effort. This requires you to have someone spend usually a couple of hours to manually rate and assess the answer of each completion, the quality of each completion. And so we've set it up in this way that you can test up to 5 prompts here. You can kind of like determine which one feels good, and you can narrow down from, again, the hundreds of applications out there down to the ones that you really want to create these rating projects for. Okay. I see a couple of comments about how I couldn't see the questions. I do apologize for that, but hopefully I'm catching up to all of them now. Kim Damalas, I think I missed it. When you showed storage of fine-tune per month, are we tied to data store hosting the fine-tune model, or can it be self-hosted? So yes, you can show the, or you can have data store host the fine-tune model by default. You can also, by the way, take this, export it, and use any other service to fine-tune the model. So you could bring this back into Google Cloud Platform, back into AWS, and fine-tune your models there. And if you connect those accounts back into data store, you can still bring those custom models that you fine-tune somewhere else and assess that in the sandbox environment. So you have the freedom of fine-tuning using whichever service provider you prefer. What we try to do is just make it as simple as possible. You don't have to leave the interface, and you can just do all of that here. But you can, a lot of organizations have some other kind of third-party product that fine-tunes models for them. You can actually connect any of those. If we go to the model catalog here, you can actually manage providers, and you can add custom models. And as long as it has, as long as you provide an endpoint URL and API key, you can plug in whatever custom models you'd like. Keith Thrasher asks, does Datasource provide an option to use LoRa when fine-tuning to be more cost efficient? I believe LoRa is actually our default. Fine-tuning without LoRa would be incredibly expensive. So we use, just to be clear, Datasource is not providing fine-tuning services of our own. We partner and use, leverage what is available from AWS, Google, and Microsoft, and use their fine-tuning. And I believe most of these are utilizing LoRa by default. I think someone would actually have to intentionally turn LoRa off. Okay. And back to Jen from earlier, it does sound like we can use AWS Bedrock guardrails and AWS SageMaker Clarify on this platform. Let me clarify real quick, pun not intended. You would use this platform for everything that we've seen here today. But what you get is this, once you fine tune this model, you will have this available on Datasource AWS. If you connect your AWS account, now it's available on your AWS. Once you have that available on your AWS, now you can use that. Now you can use Bedrock guardrails. You can use SageMaker Clarify through AWS itself. So all of this can be a kind of launch pad to make sure that the fine-tuned models are available on your AWS account. Okay. We are not FedRAMPed yet, but we did support the FBI. So if that's something that is of interest to you, we can work with you. We're partnered with the AWS public team, public cloud team. So we can find some kind of solution that allows this to be installed. Okay. I think that covers all of the questions. I know we're only 2 minutes from the close of this webinar. I was told this is the last session of the day, and so I can go overtime. Somebody from ODSC, do let me know if that's incorrect. I would love to.
You're welcome to.
I'm sorry?
You're welcome to keep going if you'd like.
All right. Thanks, Alex. So if people would like to continue, I have one last feature to share with you. If not, thank you for your time and for all the questions. I'm sorry I did not see that until late. The last and final piece is a project type that we call automated evaluation. So we've done a lot today, right? We've created all of the, we've compared and selected models. We've deployed those models. We've done a manual rating project. Now, I talked about how important that ground truth data was from that manual rating project, and you don't want to be doing that for each and every single model. And so this is where, this is kind of the last and most advanced step. You want to use automated evaluation. Some of you may have heard this term called LLM as a judge, where maybe you don't want to just use a human to be rating these projects. You want to use another LLM to determine how close the answers are to the ground truth data. So now we have this automated evaluation. We'll go ahead and click continue, and we'll say AI builders, auto eval, LLM application. Here's the one that, let's use the fine-tune one, right? Deployed application from fine-tune. And again, we'll use this fintech data set. This is the one that we've already kind of determined to be our ground truth. Now, we'll go ahead, and I think there was a question earlier about what metrics you might want to evaluate besides correctness. Well, here's various options. You can actually ask for bias, right? You can also ask for toxicity, very important for kind of streaming chats. But for simplicity, we'll stick with correctness for now. There are a couple of providers we have integrated for the moment. We have LangChain and Ragas. We're actually going to be allowing you to define your own evaluation function as well. So you can actually write in your own function, return yes or no, and make your own judge. But these are the built-in options for now. And then you can use anything for your evaluator model. We'll just use the latest version of 4.0 for now. Okay. So we'll go ahead and create that evaluation project. Now, that'll take just another couple minutes to create. I'll use the version that I set up last night. It's going to be exactly the same. So in Dyno Auto Eval here, we've got answer correctness, LangChain, and it'll actually give you the average score of this fine-tuned model relative to what we consider to be correct. So you have the prompt, you have the correct ground truth answer, and then this is the fine-tuned model's completion. Here's the score, and we even give a reason for the why we gave a score of 9 or why GPT-4o gave a score of 9, right? This actually scales out quite well. You can actually, I'll pull up a different demo that we have here. You can see here, we've got a much more advanced automated evaluation that tests multiple models. And now we run this internally once a week to see which models are performing best for this particular use case, right? In this case, Gemini 1.5 Pro and GPT-4o are actually scoring the highest. But to my pleasant surprise, Nova Pro is not far behind in answer correctness. But once you have this correctness, you can also look at things like the cost and the speed, right? And so, if I'm trying to have this bake-off between Gemini versus GPT-4o, I just look at the relative cost and speed. Oh, Gemini still costs twice as much, again, for this particular question set, right? So this hopefully provides a broader sense for the holistic idea of comparing, selecting, and continuing to defend which model you're using out there, right? As we talked about earlier, these models are constantly improving, and every month we see something new launched. So it's important not to be tied down and say, we are an Amazon company or we are a GPT-4 company. You want to be flexible and be able to swap these out at will. Divya asks, how are you determining scoring? That comes back to when I was generating this question, there was that one sense for, I'll just put something in here. On this particular second page, this is the metric, answer relevance, bias, toxicity, etc. And we selected answer correctness as determined by LangChain. So we're using this metric and we're using an evaluator model. We can choose whichever one we want here. And that's how the scoring works, right? Now, to be clear, an LLM scoring is not always going to be perfect. That's not always going to be correct. But it gives us oh, by the way, the one I created is now completed. So this is the one we just created 3 minutes ago. And we do get, we have this score now of 7.56 for the one that we fine-tuned today, right? So when you see the scores, you'll actually get the reason on the right-hand side. This is what GPT-4o is saying. Here's why I gave it a rating of 2. Okay. All right. So that brings today's official session and demo to a close. I'm happy to take any final questions that you might have. But also, if you do have any follow-ups, I know I see a couple of messages in the chat saying that people would like to connect afterwards and talk about specific projects that they have. You can always reach out to me here, ivan@datastore.ai, or alternatively, my LinkedIn, you can connect. My tag is IYLee. The deck will be shared after the call as well. So you are, yes, I cleared ODSC to share the deck. This is really kind of just some intro slides and sharing this, but all of that is available. And if you want to, and just as a final thing, I always do this for ODSC partnerships. Anybody who's attending here today, send a quick note to me stating that you came to the AI Builder Summit, and we'll add a few hundred credits to your account as well, so you just can continue playing around with it. We want to make sure that no one feels like they're shoehorned into a paid product for the demo here. Okay. What determines the price of the eval, from Lily? What determines the price of the eval, for example, llama dollars? I'm going to have to go back here. The price, I assume you're referring to this, right? So these are real-time metrics generated. So we run this you will actually, if you run this at different times a day, you will see different speeds, you'll see different costs, right? So that's part of our philosophy here at Datasaur is we're not trying to show you like these are the optimized prices or these are the best prices possible. These are real world prices that you're seeing in production right now. And so up here, we're really just looking at how many prompts is this? This is 9 prompts. So this is just the average across all 9 prompts. This is the average speed across all 9 prompts. So it's really just a real world, it's just a real-time dashboard. All right. Thank you all. Have a good day.